Okay, we are here today now to talk about the Bhagavad Gita. And I will say that the Bhagavad Gita is a very enigmatic, mysterious, difficult book to understand. So I picked this one up, the Bhagavad Gita, when I was 16, I think. And I've been carrying it around ever since. And I would open it, I would read it from cover to cover, and I never could quite grasp it. This book has driven me crazy a lot of my life, and I could feel the importance of it, right? I could sense it. Why I picked it up in the beginning, I don't know. Maybe it was because of Gandhi, and because it was during the Vietnam War, so it may have been about Gandhi. But I carried this book around for so long, and this one's got the Sanskrit, which I'm really good at, and then the English translations right after. This is from India. So this was my little copy. And this time around, I can't tell you how many times I have read this book. So I have this Barbara Stoller translation, the Eknath Eshwaran translation, and the Prabhuvananda translation, and then Yogananda's got a great translation. Lots of people have tried to translate this, and it's been the core of a lot of teachers' lives. It is the key, I would say, the key Hindu document. The scriptures, the spiritual teachings. It is a chapter in an epic story called the Mahabharata. And that story, for those of you who don't know, is something like the Iliad. It's like a historical thing with lots of pieces in it that you can read about all these different just different stories. The Bhagavad Gita is something like a chapter in that story, a chapter in the Mahabharata. Okay, this chapter that the Bhagavad Gita it's a chapter about a battle that takes place around 1000 BC. And in the battle, you have chariots, and all the people in the chariots have bows and arrows. So that's the kind of technology we're talking about. So the setting is a battlefield. It is going to be a series of spiritual teachings, but they take place on the most, quote, unholy place you could imagine, which is a battlefield. The issue that comes up is moral dilemmas on the battlefield. Basically, should I shoot or not? So that's how it starts. They call this battlefield the field of Dharma, and Dharma is D-H-A-R-M-A, Dharma. Okay, and Dharma is this law that expresses and maintains the unity of creation or the cosmos. Like, what is the law of the cosmos? That's the Dharma. But then we have also our individual Dharma. And our individual Dharma is something we are called to, something we're born to do, something that is a spiritual way of being that we need to rise into, or something like that. Our Dharma is our path. And we might share Dharma with other people in some ways, but each of us has an individual Dharma that is important for us to learn, to discover. It's kind of like, what is the law of our own self, our own being? Okay, so here's Arjuna in the middle of the battlefield. He's in his chariot, and he essentially looks to the other side that he's supposed to go into and fight these people. And here's what happens. So this is the beginning of the book. The beginning of the Bhagavad Gita. This is the Barbara Stoller translation. So here's what happens in the beginning. Arjuna, his war flag, a rampant monkey, saw the other side's sons assembled, and weapons were ready to clash, and he lifted his bow. And then he told his charioteer, Krishna is his charioteer. That's why I put the card, the chariot, out today, because who's really the charioteer? So Krishna is his charioteer. So he says, Krishna, halt my chariot between the armies. far enough for me to see these men who lust for war, ready to fight with me in the strain of battle. I see men gathered here, eager to fight, bent on serving the folly of Drishtarashtra's son. Somebody has called the war to take place. Arjuna saw them standing there, fathers, grandfathers, teachers, uncles, brothers, sons, grandsons, and friends. He surveyed his elders and companions in both armies, all his kinsmen assembled together. Dejected, filled with strange pity, he said this, Krishna, I see my kinsmen gathered here wanting war. My limbs sink, my mouth is parched, my body trembles, the hair bristles on my flesh. The magic bow slips from my hand. My skin burns. I cannot stand still. My mind reels. I see omens of chaos, Krishna. I see no good in killing my kinsmen in battle. Krishna, I seek no victory or kingship or pleasures. What use to us are kingship and delights, or even life itself? We sought kingship, delights, and pleasures for the sake of those assembled to abandon their lives and fortunes in battle. They are teachers, fathers, sons, grandfathers, uncles, grandsons, fathers, brothers of wives, and other men of our family. I do not want to kill them, even if I am killed, Krishna, not for kingship of all three worlds, much less for the earth. Now, another thing I want to tell you about Arjuna, he's a prince. He's the boss of a lot of other people. And if he starts breaking down on the battlefield, we've got trouble. Okay, so here's how it begins. And then Krishna responds. Okay, I'm skipping pages, and I skipped a lot in that too, so I'm just reading selections. Okay, so here comes Krishna's response. Krishna says, and he's his charioteer, right? He says, why this cowardice in time of crisis, Arjuna? The coward is ignoble, shameful, foreign to the ways of heaven. Don't yield to impotence. It is unnatural in you. Banish this petty weakness from your heart. Rise to the fight, Arjuna. So here's how we begin. So now the boss of him is telling him to fight. Okay, that's the whole dilemma that comes through in the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, why is the Gita important? The Gita is important because it raises philosophical, social, and spiritual issues critical to humanity. It weighs violence and nonviolence. It questions the importance or the non-importance or the relevance of doing your duty. Duty is a big deal in the Bhagavad Gita. With a capital D, what is your duty here? Where do you stand and why do you stand there and what's your duty? This is your duty with regard, for example, to the social order of the day and the moral order of the day. And secondly, your duty with regard to the cosmos, the greater unified world, that we're the source that we've been talking about. What is your duty to the greater whole? The battle is an allegory for internal questions. We're asking ourselves, Arjuna winds up asking himself, who or what is my duty to? And that's the question we ask ourselves. Who or what is my duty to? And how will I execute my duty? How am I going to pull this thing off? The overarching issue in the Gita is definition of self. What is the true essence of the individual, the Atman, as it's called in the Upanishads, and the cosmos, Brahman, or the individual in the cosmos, the Atmos inside of Brahman, with Brahman inside the Atman, the cosmos inside the self. So it's the individual and the greater, and then how do those two things work together? Okay. the Gita offers us a set of spiritual teachings and practices to examine and deepen into these questions. That's what the whole book is about. Okay, this is my take on it, basically. And you might have a slightly different take, and every time I look at this, I have a slightly different take on it. The Gita gives us several ways to enter into the struggle for self-mastery through basically this dialogue, which is internal and external, concerning the war between dark and light forces. And this is the war between dark and light forces that takes place in, quote, every human heart. Every human heart is dealing with this. So the dialogue plays out between Arjuna, a prince and a warrior, and Krishna, the chariot driver, who we later understand to be God. Arjuna stops his action on the battlefield and the dialogue ensues. Krishna begins to instruct Arjuna on the nature of what is real. Okay, so here's another quote out of the Gita about what is real. What is real? Krishna says, well, first of all, Arjuna, distressed, says, I will not fight. Krishna says, you grieve for those beyond grief. Okay, who is he grieving for? He's grieving for those fathers, uncles, cousins. Okay, you grieve for those beyond grief, and you speak words of insight, but learned men do not grieve for the dead or the living. Never have I not existed, nor you, nor these kings, and never in the future shall we cease to exist. And then he discusses that a lot and goes on to say, our bodies are known to end, but the embodied self is enduring, indestructible, and immeasurable. Therefore, Arjuna, fight the battle. He who thinks this self is a killer, and he who thinks it killed, both fail to understand. It does not kill, nor is it killed. It is not born, nor does it die. Having been, it will never not be. Unborn, enduring, constant, and primordial. It is not killed when the body is killed. Weapons do not cut it. Fire does not burn it. Waters do not wet it. Wind does not wither it. It cannot be cut or burned. It cannot be wet or withered. It is enduring, all-pervasive, fixed, immovable, and timeless. It is called unmanifest, inconceivable, and immutable. Since you know that to be so, you should not grieve. If you think of its birth and death as ever recurring, then too, great warrior, you have no cause to grieve. Death is certain for anyone born, and birth is certain for the dead. Since the cycle is inevitable, you have no cause to grieve. So he goes on, he continues talking about that, and eventually he reveals that he himself, Krishna, the chariot driver, lives inside everyone, without and within. Okay, so here's another note on this. Krishna says, I am the self, abiding in the heart of all creatures. I am their beginning, their middle, and their end. Krishna is teaching Arjuna that God, by every name, is both immanent and transcendent, existing in the here and now, but also existing in the greater reality. And the goal is to realize that immanence and transcendence are all one. It is all one. The Atman is God immanent inside or as the self. Brahman is God transcendent, seeming separate, but in the end, there is no distinction. So it comes to the place of being called not two. There are not two. And this not two-ness is discoverable, as they say, in the climax of meditation. So Ishvaran talks about this. Oops, there goes my pile. Ishvaran talks about it in his translation of the Bhagavad Gita. And he says that in the Chandogya Upanishad, which we read, or some people may have read last time, it says, it talks about Atman is Brahman, and it winds up saying that thou art. That thou art. That's the line out of Chandogya Upanishad. The one underlies and permeates the many. Okay, so here's what the Bhagavad Gita brings out for us to practice, or whoever is looking at this. Brahman, what is Brahman? Brahman, the Godhead, all, everything, the divine cosmos, the transcendent God, seemingly separate but not separate. The Atman, that's the divine core of the personality, which is immanent God, God immanent within the self. Dharma, these are the concepts that come forward. And here I'm speaking a lot about what Ishvaran is bringing forward in his translation. Dharma, the law that expresses and maintains the unity of creation, ultimately that creates the essential order and harmony in the universe. And what they say, those who study this and those who teach it, is that the highest dharma of all that we could practice is called ahimsa. A-H-I-M-S-A. And what is ahimsa? But non-violence and universal love. That's the highest form on the earth plane. And that's what comes out in this book. Karma is another major concept that comes out. Karma is the web of cause and effect. And what they say is that every event is both a cause and an effect. And everything we do produces karma, meaning we're creating reality in the world all the time. But everything we do also, it not only produces realities in the world, but it produces realities in our mind, in our consciousness. And so by the actions we take, we're creating our mindset, you might say. We're creating our consciousness. And then, so if we realize we've taken a wrong turn or it's a lower place than we want to be, we can correct that. We can correct our karma. Okay, karma is another concept then, and then samsara. Samsara is another concept that's brought up, and samsara is the cycle of birth and death, and that's from the appearance of the smaller appearance of only looking at the manifest world in the cycle of birth and death. And then the last major concept is the concept of moksha, M-O-K-S-H-A, M-O-K-S-H-A, or nirvana. And that is considered to be supreme liberation. The experience of supreme liberation or nirvana or moksha is called samadhi, S-A-M-A-D-H-I. And the state of supreme liberation is called moksha or nirvana. Okay, so the experience is samadhi and the state is called moksha or nirvana. This goes beyond the experience of maya, which is not a unitive state. Okay, maya is when we look out at the world and we see the appearance of many separate transient objects. Okay, and this is not supreme liberation. The supreme liberation is to be able to see beyond all of the separate, merely physical objects that we are aware of in waking life into a dimension where everything that's manifest and unmanifest is all one. That's a supreme unitive state. And that's what the Bhagavad Gita is trying to bring forth, that we live in a supreme unitive state if we can see it. Okay, so Maya is considered to be the world of name and form and multiplicity. Basically what we see and experience in our waking life. So they say in the Bhagavad Gita there are 4 states of consciousness: waking, dreaming, dreamless sleep, and unitive. This unitive consciousness is the goal, to understand that it is huge, it's much bigger than we think, and this unitive consciousness is often just called the 4th, which I really like. So it's 3 states of consciousness, which would be waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep, and then the 4th is called unitive. So a lot of times if you just hear the 4th, it means unitive consciousness. So we're on the field, we're in the field, it's the battlefield, It's the field of Dharma, and that's the field we're walking out into every day. It's grocery outlet, it's Pete's Coffee, it's the mall, it's Main Street, it's the presidential debates. This is the field. This is our field. It's hanging out in the plaza in Madrid. It's wherever you are. That's the field, right? Okay, and that's your field of Dharma. Because the Dharma is how are you going to handle it? What are you going to do? What are you going to learn? How are you going to be? All of that stuff. All of this is contained in the field, and the field is contained in the individual. So the personality is also the field, part of the field. It's a field of forces. And in this place, in this space of the personality, with these different states of consciousness, the personality and the ego dies every night when we go to sleep. And every morning it becomes reassembled. I had a strange experience a couple weeks ago where my 7-year-old grandson fell down at school and his tooth split his lip open basically, and he had to go into the emergency room and they couldn't fix it because with him awake, because it was your lips are very, very sensitive, and if he moved it would have been a disaster. So they had to put him under general anesthesia, and it was scary watching. So I was there, I was in there, and when he came out of the general anesthesia, he was trying to focus. It was very hard for him. And he couldn't see because it messes up your eyesight, so he couldn't see, he couldn't move, couldn't lift his arms or legs, he couldn't run. He was kind of thinking about running, but he couldn't do it, he couldn't move, so he was very scared. And he could hear his mother's voice, his mommy was there, and he started waking, and we were talking to him, trying to help him come out of it, trying to help him not be afraid. And the first thing he recognized was his mother. And he said, "I can't see you, and I'm not afraid because I can hear you, but I can't see you, and you look like a monster, but I know you're my mommy. I know you're my mommy because I can feel it." He said that after he said his first word. His first word was mommy. Mommy. And then he explained to her, he knew who she was, and then he could accept that. "I'm not afraid because I can feel you." Those were his exact words. "I can feel you." Then he waited. And then he said, "I have a little brother. I call him Wild West because he's so wild." So he started remembering who he was. He was assembling his life. And then the next thing that was important to him was, he said, "I wonder if I can still do math." So that was the next thought that came. And then the next one was, "I think I can skateboard. I think I know how to ride a skateboard." So he would say these things as they would come, and I watched him. He reassembled his personality right before our very eyes in order of importance, which was really interesting. Math was very high on the list. So he came out, it was like he was reborn, and he said that too. Later he said, "I went into a dream and I was born again. I remember being born again through this experience of going into what he called the dream." Yeah, and he was reborn out of the dream. So the teaching of the Bhagavad Gita is for us to understand that our personality is the field. It's the field. The personality is the field. What we're engaging in, the emergency room is the field. It's all the field. Okay, the critical aspect and the object of the Bhagavad Gita is to become a knower of the field. I love these words. That's why I kept going back there, since I was 16 years old into this book. What does it mean to be a knower of the field? To be a knower of the field. The 13th teaching in the Bhagavad Gita is about being a knower of the field. Knowing the field. The field, Krishna says, the field denotes this body, and wise men call one who knows it the field knower. Know me as the field knower in all fields. What I deem to be knowledge is knowledge of the field and its knower. Hear from me in summary what the field is in its character and changes, and of the field knower's power. The field contains the great elements: individuality, understanding, unmanifest nature, the 11 senses, and the 5 sense realms. Longing, hatred, happiness, suffering, bodily form, consciousness, resolve. Thus is the field with its changes defined in summary. Knowledge means humility, sincerity, nonviolence, patience, honesty, reverence for one's teacher, purity, stability, self-restraint. I shall teach you what it is to be known. For knowing it, one attains immortality. It is called the Supreme Infinite Spirit, beginningless, neither being nor non-being. Its hands and feet reach everywhere. Its head and face see in every direction, hearing everything. It remains in the world, enveloping all. Lacking all the sense organs, it shines in their qualities. Unattached, it supports everything. Without qualities, it enjoys them. Outside and within all creatures, inanimate but still animate, too subtle to be known, it is far distant yet near. Undivided, it seems divided among creatures. Understood as their sustainer, it devours and creates them. The light of lights beyond darkness, it is called. Knowledge attained by knowledge, fixed in the heart of everyone. So, in summary, I have explained the field and knowledge of it. A man devoted to me, knowing this, enters into my being. So, to become a knower of the field, we must enter into the path of evolution. Okay, how do we do this? We do it through understanding the 4 yogas and the 3 gunas, basically, which is what the Bhagavad Gita explains. There are many, 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 many yogas, but of those 4 are focused on, and of those 4, mainly 3, there are 3 what is called gunas. Okay, G-U-N-A, guna. 3 forces of evolution. So here are the 3 gunas. The first one is, okay, no, let me give it to you. I'm going to give it to you in English, so I think you'll understand it much better. Okay, the gunas are likened to 3 states of water. Okay, so those 3 states of water are going to be solid, liquid, and gas. Okay, solid would be ice. Liquid is melting into like a river. And then gas is steam, when the power of steam is harnessed and understood, and that is considered to be enlightened consciousness. So solid, liquid, and gas. The solid is inert. It doesn't move. The liquid is activity. The gas represents harmony or equilibrium. And I'm going to give you the 3 Sanskrit names of those. So instead of starting with the Sanskrit, I think it's just easier to start with the concept. Okay, so the solid, the first guna, the solid, is called tamas, T-A-M-A-S. The liquid is called rajas, R-A-J-A-S. And the gas, which represents harmony or equilibrium, is called sattva. Sattva. So those are the three gunas. Guna in English means strand. So these are the strands of existence that weave together, the three strands of existence, or the fabric of existence. They also create the veil that hides unity in a covering of diversity. Hides unity in a covering of diversity. Okay, so, and they say when we still our minds, we can see the whole. Okay, so what is the whole? The whole is to realize, see, if we just take a snapshot of what's happening, we think it's one thing is happening. But if we back off and see the bigger picture, we realize that something that's in a state of solid, that's in a solid state, will later be a liquid state, will later be a gaseous state, will later be a solid state, will later be a liquid state, not necessarily in that order, but it will move all around. So if we back up, we're going to say, oh, all exists at once. And instead of just seeing this thing as a solid, we're going to see that thing and we're going to see the whole potential of that thing. Not just that thing in the state it's in right now, and reach the conclusion that's the way it is, because it's not the way it is. Everything has the potential for all three states, the three gunas. Okay, so we want to back up and see the whole thing. Now these three gunas also represent three different states of consciousness. So tamas, that's the one that's the solid form, represents the subconscious or the unconscious. That's stuff we're not aware of yet. That's solid, the solid form. Rajas, which is the liquid state, that represents a stream of thought. That's where our thoughts are moving and everything comes alive. Sattva represents the higher mind. They call it the higher mind. So it's a greater form of consciousness. It's the unitive consciousness. And that, in that higher form of consciousness, we come into a state of natural harmony and what is called selfless action. So the action can be, it's action, but we begin to move into selfless action. Okay, we'll come back to that. Unity is understanding that these three gunas are one whole. They're all a whole. They're ultimately inseparable. And unity is our ultimate goal. That is the goal. This is all according to the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so the ultimate goal is the identification of the body and the mind with the whole of life. And knowing this, we begin to understand the self, with a capital S, the self, with all its different ways of being. Because we're not just one way. We are the whole of it. And when we understand that we contain all those forces of evolution, tamas, rajas, sattva, we begin to engage with the whole of life. We are more than we thought we were. The world is more than we thought it was. And we can't just take it at face value like a snapshot. Okay, so it gives us the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita gives us those three gunas, and then it gives us the 4 yogas. The Gita is basically a textbook for understanding these 4 yogas. So Karma Yoga, which is the first third of the Bhagavad Gita. Karma Yoga is about action. And the idea is, how can we take our action, how can we move our action from small self-oriented action to large self-oriented action, which would, in a certain sense, be selfless action, which takes into account the greater good. They don't use the word greater good. That was a slip. But the greater whole. The greater whole. Okay. Then Jnana Yoga. Jnana. That's the second third of the Gita. That's about knowledge. Karma Yoga is action. Jnana yoga is knowledge, and it's about learning. So we take in more knowledge. We take in the word, so to speak. I like that idea earlier. The word, once we know it, we can let it go. But this is about taking it in, learning, taking it in. And once we learn something, we can go to a higher form with it. We can use our will and our discernment to move to a higher level. So that's the yoga of knowledge. The third form and the third part of the Bhagavad Gita is bhakti yoga. And now we should be understanding a little bit about that one. That is the yoga of devotion. That is the mystic path. The final third of the Bhagavad Gita, bhakti yoga, and that is where we are ultimately headed. Bhakti, they say, is the highest you can go. Then the fourth form of yoga, Raja Yoga, basically R-A-J-A, Raja Yoga, basically runs through the whole thing. And Raja Yoga is about meditation, disciplining the mind and the senses, and entering into healing stillness. The goal is unity. The goal is self-understanding through the way that works for you. So the way that works for you might be karma yoga, and that's through action. You develop yourself through action. It might be jnana yoga, knowledge, pursuing more knowledge. It might be bhakti yoga, loving, focusing on love, 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 and opening the doors of love. Or it might be Raja Yoga, just going into deep meditation. What we're seeking is this enlightenment, which is unity. And in this moment of enlightenment, Krishna suddenly reveals his true form. And that is that Krishna is everything, everywhere. And he reveals his form to Arjuna at a certain point in the book, in the chariot. And Arjuna is taken back by what he sees. Krishna is everything. He is all. It was a multiform, wondrous vision Arjuna saw, with countless mouths and eyes and celestial ornaments, brandishing many divine weapons. Everywhere was boundless divinity, containing all astonishing things, wearing divine garlands and garments anointed with divine perfumes. If the light of 1,000 suns were to rise in the sky at once, it would be like the light of that great spirit. Arjuna saw all the universe in its many ways and parts, standing as one in the body of the God of gods. Then, filled with amazement, his hair bristling on his flesh, Arjuna bowed his head to the God, joined his hands in homage. In the end, each one of us finds success by focusing on our own action to achieve unity consciousness. Each one achieves success by focusing on his own action. Hear how one finds success by focusing on his own action. By his own action, a man finds success worshiping the source of all creatures' activity, the presence pervading all that is. Better to do one's own duty imperfectly than to do another man's well. Doing action intrinsic to his being, a man avoids guilt. I like that passage. Better to do your own dharma well than try to follow somebody else's. Okay, Gandhi, I want to talk about Gandhi for just a minute. Gandhi basically carried the Bhagavad Gita all through his days and got his inspiration out of this book. Plus, he also carried around Tolstoy's book, The Kingdom of God is Within You. The Bhagavad Gita he went back to time after time after time. He called this book his spiritual dictionary. He lived by it, and the way he lived by it was he would just open to any passage anytime he felt he was flagging, he was weak, or he felt dejected like Arjuna felt in the beginning of the book, where he didn't know what to do. He was stymied in the middle of the battlefield. He couldn't fight, and he was told he also couldn't not fight. So what was he going to do? Gandhi encapsulates the Gita's message as selfless action. For Gandhi, it became selfless action. That became the key. And here we come to one of my favorite pieces that I'm always talking about, as Krishna tells Arjuna, and this was key for Gandhi, you have a right to the work, but not to the outcome of the work. One of my favorites, you've heard me say that. Okay, here's the quote. You have a right to the work. This is from Krishna to Arjuna. You have a right to work, but never to the fruit of work. You should never engage in action for the sake of reward, nor should you long for inaction. Perform work in this world, Arjuna, as a man established within himself, without selfish attachments, and alike in success and defeat. For yoga is perfect evenness of mind. So this is Gandhi reading this over and over and over. In the end, everything depends on your motives. Everything depends on your intention. No matter what your action is, it's all dependent on what your intention is. What is it you're trying to accomplish? If you try to accomplish love, there is a better chance you are going to arrive at something about that outcome than if you're not trying to accomplish love. If you're trying to accomplish something that may be the opposite of that. In the end, everything depends on your intention. In the end, we learn to see original goodness in all. The original goodness. We learn to be that in ourselves the best way we can. In the end, we place all we are and have become in our heart. And when we place it in our heart, this is called Shraddha, S-H-R-A-D-D-A. That's where we take everything we learn and we imagine we carve it on our heart. Shraddha. S-H-R-A-D-D-A, Shraddha. Our Shraddha is all we are and all we have become. A person is, as the Gita says, a person is what his Shraddha is. In the end, entering into the spiritual path and becoming a knower of the field is not running away from life, but running into life. And I would like to end this with going back to my book, my Bhagavad Gita that I got when I was 16, and just doing what Gandhi did to see what comes up. Okay, here's Gandhi opening the book on any page and seeing what happens. Okay, so this is our test now. Okay, I'm going to open it to any page and look at it. And it says, therefore, Arjuna, think of me at all times and fight. With mind and reason thus surrendered to me, you will doubtless come to me. That's the passage. Therefore, Arjuna, think of me at all times and fight. With mind and reason thus surrendered to me, you will doubtless come to me. Therefore, Arjuna, think of me at all times and fight. With mind and reason thus surrendered to me, you will doubtless come to me. That's why I found this book so enigmatic when I was 16 and I couldn't understand it. What? Fight. Okay, but the question that's raised is, and this is Gandhi now thinking this, fight? Fight? What about nonviolence? Okay, I get it. My dharma. The only thing worth fighting for is nonviolence and love and the unified field. Therefore, I am going to do my best to fight as hard as I can from now for the rest of my life for ahimsa, nonviolence. That is the point. Okay. The last thing I want to mention about this is that I felt it was really interesting looking at Sri Aurobindo, who also carried around the Bhagavad Gita and was very moved by another Indian saint. He had been a revolutionary fighting against the British in India and was in jail for blowing up a building. And then after that, in jail, he started meditating. So his take on the Bhagavad Gita, and by the way, never went back into the literal battlefield. From then on, what Sri Aurobindo did was meditate, and he became a spiritual teacher and a great saint in India, and never entered back into fighting for anybody, for any cause, except the cause of love. But what he took away, so Gandhi's takeaway was selfless action, just in 2 words. Aurobindo's takeaway in 2 words was radical individualism, which I find very interesting. And that's because it is critical for each one of us to find our own Dharma and then live it. Because the answers to these questions are not going to be the same for any 2 people. Should I fire? Should I shoot my arrow or not? Okay, fight your fight. But what is your fight? Is your fight going to be to stop the battle on the battlefield? Is that your fight? Is your fight to shoot your arrows? No matter what you do, consider your own intention, your own motivation, and keep yourself focused on the energies that are important for your own personal evolution. End of the Bhagavad Gita. Okay, so that is, at this point in time, that is my take on the Gita. Might change, 10 years hence, as I've been struggling with this book my entire life. But I was very happy to enter into it again.